How important is the project plan? This is a topic that many people like to avoid, and many people like to go with a plan that's in their head but not written or is not legible somewhere that they can reference back to it. I'd submit to you today that in a traditional project, the plan is very important. The plan is very important because it outlines for us how we're going to manage the project, how we're going to execute the project itself. Let's get started. Let's talk about how important is the project management plan. Before the plan, we have to have the project charter. Now, this project charter really starts the project itself. It's the birth certificate of the project itself. It gives measurable project objectives and criteria. It also tells us the need and how the project specifies or satisfies that need. It is a high-level document. It does not contain very many details, but it does give us a brief description of the project, the boundaries, key deliverables, and it may give us some budgetary constraints. You can only spend X amount of dollars on this project, for example, or you have to complete this project by a certain date. It may identify for us some stakeholders. It could, and usually they do identify stakeholders. Of course, identifying the stakeholders is an important part of our project as well, isn't it? And it may identify some of the project risks that we potentially feel may impact us on this particular project. This project charter is written by the project sponsor and or the project manager or senior management. It names the project manager by name, and that's a very important aspect of the project charter. Designate who the project manager is by name and establish their level of authority. And also, sometimes projects are canceled during the middle of them for various reasons. You want to specify under what circumstances the project may be closed early. It does give us high-level acceptance criteria for the project, and then it specifies the project objectives and key measurements. It's signed by the project sponsor, senior management, and the project manager. Everyone buys into this project charter, and that really starts the planning of the project. It starts the identification of the stakeholders. We have three different types of projects that we're going to be dealing with. And the first is called the predictive approach. Then we have the agile approach. Then we have what's called a hybrid approach, where we may have some agile and some predictive or traditional types of projects all working within the umbrella of a project. And that is really the way that most projects are really managed, is a hybrid approach. And I know people say, well, I've never done agile before. But you know what? You have done agile before. I've never worked a project that I've not had some agile in it. I just didn't know it was called agile. And we do supplement predictive projects quite a bit with agile. We could also supplement an agile project with predictive approach for certain key elements of the project itself. And that would all be called a hybrid approach when we combine those two at whatever level we would combine them at. The project management plan importance. When I talk about a traditional project, I am also referring to a predictive or a waterfall project. Those words are really synonymous. And in a traditional project, the project management plan is very, very important. I can't overemphasize the importance of having a formal project management plan. In agile projects, not important at all. Not important at all. We execute agile projects based on the product backlog, and we don't have a plan. That's one of the premises of agile. We don't have a plan. We are delivering value to the customer, and we are delivering value to the customer frequently. Hybrid projects, it is important for the traditional part of the hybrid project. Whether that's the bigger part of the project or the lesser part of the project, the project management plan is important for that part of the project that is traditional. Today, we look at a project life cycle, and when we look at the project life cycle, our focus today is on organizing and preparing. And this is where we develop our project management plan itself. Organizing and preparing. And that is the project management plan is developed there. There's other phases to the project like executing and then closing, pre-project work and starting the project with the initial processes such as develop project charter and identify stakeholders. Here is a picture of the 10 by 5 by 49, which is the 10 by 5 by 49, 10 knowledge areas, 5 process groups across the top, and 49 different processes internal to this. This is based on the 6th edition of the PMBOK Guide. Today we're going to focus on the 10 knowledge areas. 10 knowledge areas, and you can see right here the 10 knowledge areas going down the left border here. We have integration, we have scope. We are going to focus on the process group that is called the planning process group. Down through this process group here is all of our planning processes that are used to develop our project management plan. The knowledge areas, for example, integration, scope, schedule, cost, quality, resource, communications, risk, procurement, and stakeholder. In each one of these process or these knowledge areas, in each one of them, we're going to have a plan in that area that tells us how to do that particular area. And that's areas of expertise. Looking at it in this perspective, this is that chart, the 10 by 5 by 49 that we just looked at, but it's laid out in a practical project management flow. This is the flow that one of my courses is based on called Practical Project Management. But this has all 49 of those processes in it, but it is in a format that is more understandable and more usable as we manage projects themselves. The areas in yellow, all of these are planning processes. There's 24 of these planning processes, 24 of them. Each one of these planning processes contributes something significant to the project. If it doesn't contribute something significant to the project, then we should not be doing them. We shouldn't do it if it doesn't add value to the project. For example, if I'm not going to procure anything, why do I need a procurement management plan? If I'm not concerned about risk, why do I need anything regarding risk? Why do I need to understand anything about risk? I can't imagine a project where you're not concerned about risk, but if that were the case. So you tailor this chart, and particularly the planning and the executing and the monitoring and controlling, you tailor that to the methodology that you use to manage your projects, and then you tailor it to the project itself based on the needs of the project. 24 of those planning processes. Here is the project management plan. There are 19 subsidiary plans to the project management plan. It is one plan. It's a formal written document, but there are 19 subcomponents to it. On the right, you see the process where each individual plan is created. On the left would be the subsidiary plans that each project plan is made up of. And they are outputs from these different processes here. We have, for example, scope, schedule, cost, baselines. Those are extremely, very project specific. You will develop those for each project that you're working on. The other subsidiary plans are more how-to plans. A lot of them will contain project-specific information, but they're more of a general, a generic type of a plan. And we'll look at those as well. Here we have some of the plans outlined. These are the more project-specific. The scope baseline, the schedule baseline, the cost baseline. These baselines contain the details for the project itself. What is the scope going to consist of? What is the schedule going to be? What is outlined? What are the milestones I have to meet? What are the dates that I will do the activities? Cost baseline. How much is it going to cost? How much is each activity going to cost? What is my budget? Those are the things that are addressed in the cost baseline. We'll talk about these later. Then we have the resource management plan. The resource management plan has project-specific information. For example, it identifies the physical resources, the trucks, the equipment, the servers, the computers, whatever it might be, the physical equipment, the facilities, those types of things. It also has the human resources in it. What skill sets do I need to do this project? Do I need a database programmer? Do I need a finished carpenter? Do I need an electrician? Exactly what do I need for this project from a human resource standpoint? Then we have the quality management plan. Quality, depending on the project, depending on your focus, the quality of a project can be very, very specific. This quality management plan tells us how we're going to meet the quality requirements for the project itself. It's very important. We'll start this early in the project because the quality management plan is going to have an impact on what processes we use, on the scope of the project, on the schedule of the project, on the cost of the project, on everything basically in the project. It can possibly be impacted by the quality requirements. Then communication management plan. Communication management plan is our stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? What is it they want to hear? How often do they want to hear it? When? What format? It gets into the details of how we're going to communicate with the stakeholders. Then we have the procurement management plan. Under procurement, if we have procurement, we will do our make or buy decisions. We will understand what we need to make, what we need to buy. Maybe we don't have the skill sets available. Maybe we need to buy something to get us to enable us to meet the schedule. Whatever the case may be, we do our make or buy analysis and we determine what contract type we're going to use and those types of things. Then we have our stakeholder engagement plan. This stakeholder engagement plan is another important plan for our project. Our stakeholders are listed. It's based on the stakeholder register. And our stakeholders are listed in this engagement plan. And we develop a plan for each stakeholder. If that stakeholder is negative on the project and we want them to be neutral to the project, how are we going to move them from negative to the neutral position? If they're neutral and we want to move them to a leading position, how are we going to move them from that neutral position to the leading position? You see, stakeholder engagement on a project is very important to the project. I lost a contract one time because I did not get a specific stakeholder engaged in a project that was negative towards the project. And I lost it. And I lost it because of the stakeholder engagement plan and because of the communications management plan. Those two work hand in hand with each other, and we need to keep our stakeholders engaged in a project if we want to have a successful project. Then we have these generic subsidiary plans, I call them. For example, our configuration management plan. That is revision control. How do I make sure everybody's singing on the same sheet of music, in other words? How do I make sure you're using the current revision of the drawings, of the plan, of the software you're developing, whatever it might be? This is revision control. That is the configuration management plan. In a traditional environment, change management plan is very important. Change management plan, we have a process for changes to be issued. Who can issue them, for example? What is the process they go through for approval? It's very important that all changes in a traditional environment are managed, that we manage those changes to make sure that they're needed for the project and to make sure that they are justified for this particular project. We have the performance measurement baseline. That's how the project is performing. When I look at the project performance baseline, that is a combination of the scope, schedule, and cost baselines. If I want to know how the schedule is performing, I go to the schedule baseline. If I want to know how the cost is performing, I go to the cost baseline. The scope, I go to the scope baseline. But if I want to know the project level performance, I go to the project performance measurement baseline. Then we have the project lifecycle description. We saw that earlier. Project lifecycle description. That is cradle to grave. It starts pre-project and it goes post-project even to the point of maintaining whatever it is you're delivering. Cradle to grave. We have the developmental approach. What is the development? How are we going to develop this project? How are we going to manage this project? Are we going to do a predictive, iterative, agile, or hybrid approach? That's where we make that determination. The scope management plan. The scope management plan is a how-to plan. Basically, it tells us how to do the other 7 scope processes. That's what it tells us primarily. The requirements management plan is the same thing. How do we do the requirements? How do we collect requirements? How do we analyze requirements? How do we justify requirements? Schedule management plan, another how-to plan. How do we develop a schedule? How do we do the 6 schedule processes that are required to develop the schedule? And then the cost management plan. How do we develop the cost? What's our cost baseline going to look like? That's all focused on developing the cost, estimating the cost. And then we have risk management plan. Risks are also known as uncertainties. We can have positive risk, we can have negative risk. Opportunities or threats, in other words. And this risk management plan will define for us how we're going to deal with risk overall. If I want to know the specific plan and information on a risk, I always go to the risk register, which is a document. But for the overall management of the risk, and it's also going to have things like the culture of the organization with regards to risk and key stakeholders that you need to understand the risk concerns from and those types of things. I call these the generic or how-to plans, basically. They do contain limited information on a project in most cases, but it's not that significant. The cost schedule and scope baselines, those are very significant. Some of the other plans that we just went through that are more project specific, we need to be aware of that and make sure that we complete those appropriately. I talked about risk register, and the risk register, you can see it on the lower right here. Risk register is where all the risks are contained. A stakeholder register, I mentioned, that's also where we list all the stakeholders and all their needs and their assessments. And then we also have an issue log. And if you look at this entirely, there are 33 different potential documents that we might have in any project. And we'd want to certainly set all these documents up into a form that we can actually use that form from project to project and not have to reinvent the wheel every time. Again, that's the focus of the Practical Project Management course, is to help you determine that. Now, think of it this way. Documents provide information needed to manage the project. The project plan tells us how to manage the project. Those are 2 things. Now, the documents are not part of the project management plan, but we really need those to be able to execute the plan in accordance with the plan itself. Here is the importance of the project management plan. First of all, these are the inputs into develop project management plan. These are the subsidiary plans that are outputs from other processes. They come as an input into develop project management plan, and they become the project management plan, one project management plan with 19 subsidiary chapters potentially. This is the importance of this project management plan. It's an input into all of these processes. Either that, a part of it may be an input, or the whole plan may be an input. And that helps us then to develop or execute and develop our overall project management plan. It's very important that we focus on developing this project management plan to the depth that is needed for the project that you're working on. Some of you said you're struggling with deadlines. I mean, this should help you clarify that with the milestones and things like that. There's any number of things that would assist you with this. Project management plan, some characteristics of it. Number 1, it is a formal written document. It is signed by the project manager, the sponsor, and functional managers. One document provides details for the project. Once it's formal, you have to issue a change request to change the plan. That's always a necessity. Up to the point that it's formalized, and even beyond that point, we call it progressive elaboration. Progressive elaboration says that I don't know everything at the beginning of the project. Let's take at the project charter level, for example. I know very little about the project. I have some guidelines in that project charter, but I know very little about it. As I go through and I start developing my plan, I'm going to start adding information to my project management plan. And throughout the life of a traditional project, you're going to be learning new information, and as a result of that new information you learn, you're going to go back and you're going to update the project management plan to reflect that new information. You may also update project documents, whichever the case, or both cases. We always update to reflect that new information. That's progressively elaboration or progressively elaborated. Planning of the project will continue until the project is closed. If you look in the truest sense of the word at a predictive or a waterfall project says you do the plan, then you execute the plan, then you deliver value. That is waterfall in the truest sense of the word. But we don't manage projects that way today, do we? Because of this tool called progressive elaboration, we're going to start executing as early as we can in the project while we're even still planning the project. And throughout the life of that project, throughout executing, for example, we will continue on with the planning. That's very important to realize. And I think if you look back over the projects that you've managed, that's been the case that you've always done as well. We do want to start executing that project then as soon as possible. And we may have that enough plan done that we can start executing, and then we will start executing while we're still planning other parts of the project, or even this part of the project in some cases. We have, first of all, the most important plan, and that's called the scope baseline. Scope baseline. This is unique to every project, and it's composed of three things: the scope statement, the WBS, and the WBS dictionary. Here we have the scope statement. Now, the scope statement is a detailed description of the project. It has everything in it. It has step-by-step, basically, of what this project is going to entail. The project manager and the project team are going to write this scope statement, and this gives them an understanding of the project and what the project is all about. Very important. It has exclusions in it, for example. It may have some milestones in it. It may have some risk identified in it. And it certainly has a detailed description of the project and a detailed description of the deliverable in it. It's very important. It's a text document. We have the WBS here, and of course the WBS gives us what we call work packages. The work packages, as you can see here, are the smallest level of the WBS, work breakdown structure. Those work packages are what we execute as a project manager. We execute the work packages. A work package is a decomposition of the scope baseline. First, we create the scope baseline or scope statement. Then we decompose that scope statement down into the WBS and down to the lowest level, which is the work package. That's the purpose of our scope statement. It's written by the team and the project manager. It's also decomposed by the team and the project manager down into the WBS. Think about it this way. That WBS work package is small enough that it can be estimated for time and cost. It's small enough that it can be estimated for or managed. And that's really the definition of it. It's small enough it can be managed, small enough it can be executed, and small enough that it can be estimated for time and for cost. That is the description of a WBS work package. Not much information. Not much information. You see that little block? You can't put much in there. You're going to have primarily a title, and you're going to have an index number. Index number, everything tied to that work package will be tied back to that index number. Given that, what I'm going to have in addition to that will be our WBS dictionary up here on the upper right. The WBS dictionary is going to contain all of the details for that particular work package. It'll have, for example, the activities that it takes to complete that work package. It always has a description, maybe some estimates in there, time and cost estimates. It may have some technical information. It does have a detailed description of what you're going to execute in this particular work package. There's a lot of important information that will be contained in that WBS dictionary. Each one of these nodes would have a WBS dictionary accompanying it. That's a companion document, and that's our reference document for the work packages themselves. Everything in the project plan is built based on the scope baseline. We need to make sure we get the scope right. If we don't get the scope right, then the schedule will be wrong, the cost will be wrong, resources will be wrong, quality will be wrong, everything will be wrong in the project. Your focus in a scope baseline is to make sure that you're developing everything that is needed and that it is correct. Don't leave anything out. Of course, this scope baseline is going to start off with the requirements documentation. The requirements. And the requirements, we're going to collect those requirements from the stakeholders. And we have to make sure we collect the requirements right. Then we have to make sure we have identified all the stakeholders and have all the requirements. Then we can rewrite those into the scope statement and then decompose it and then create the WBS. Once this scope baseline is finished, it's published, it's going to be part of the formal project management plan. If I need to make a change to it, I have to issue a change request, get it approved, before I can modify the scope baseline. It is a controlled plan. Any questions from anyone? If you have questions, just chat them to me and I will address those questions as you issue them. We talked about quality and its importance. And I talked about it starting early in the project. And the quality management plan is more project specific. But we can still start off with a template of it. And you can see a template of the quality management plan in the upper right corner there. This talks about how to complete the other quality processes. It also gives us the quality requirements for this project and how we're going to meet those requirements. The plan's quality of deliverable and processes that are used. We may have to have certain processes that we have to use, or certain features that we have to do, certain steps we have to complete. That would all be a part of the quality management plan. This is important. As a project manager, one of the attributes that a project manager always has is continuous improvement. You want to be in a mode of always continuously improving your processes, continuously improving how you do your planning, continuously improving how you are executing your plan. The quality management plan also contains quality checklists and your tools such as the check sheet, test, and inspection documents. It also contains a quality policy. Do you have a quality policy for your project? You should have. Well, what is that quality policy going to be? That quality policy may be a subset of your organization quality policy. It's your commitment to quality as you manage projects. Once you develop that quality policy, then you can use it from one project to another, showing your commitment to quality. It provides the quality metrics, and that's how we're going to measure our product or our deliverable to make sure it meets the quality standards. Then we have our communications management plan. The communications management plan I mentioned earlier. how that I didn't communicate and I didn't execute an engagement plan for one of my clients, and he was a key stakeholder, and I lost a project because of that. Communications is critical to a project. You've got to have open communications. You have your communications management plan in the lower right here, and that communications management plan is going to tell us who, what, when, and how often, what format, and that's the way that we need to communicate with our stakeholders. It also has a glossary of terms, and it addresses who, what format, and how often. It does provide instructions for the other communications processes, and it gives us assumptions and constraints for the project, perhaps, particularly with regards to communication. And there are also many tools that are associated with communications management, such as active listening, paralingual discussions, and the formats and different things that the methods that we use to communicate. Look at this. 90% of a project manager's time is spent communicating. 90% of your time is spent communicating. 50% of that time is spent communicating with the team. As a project manager, it is very important that you have open communications and with everyone concerning the project. You are the visionary for the project. You are the promoter for the project. It's up to you to sell the project and to get everyone on board with that particular project. Then we have the resource management plan, just very briefly here. There's about 4 pages to this plan, potentially. But one of the things you want to look at is the roles and responsibilities of your human resources. And you want to clearly define each role and each responsibility for the project. What skills do you need? How do I acquire those resources? Do I go to the functional managers and beg and borrow the people from them? Do I outsource some of them? Exactly how do I acquire the physical resources? Then how do I release the resources? Once they've finished their work on the project, they need to go somewhere, back to their previous job perhaps, whatever the case may be. What is the approach for releasing them? Here is an important aspect to the resource management plan. Team building and development. We want to take a group of people and we want to get that group of people working together as one. We want them working as a team on our project. We want to do some team building. We want to do some team training. We want to do team performance assessments to make sure that we are performing at the optimum level. This contains human resources, it contains physical resources, and then team roles and responsibilities. Under team roles and responsibilities, we also have what's called the team charter. What is our team charter? And this is generally developed by the team itself, and it will contain information such as honesty and integrity and these types of things. What is our approach to project management? And then certainly it should have some ground rules in it, such as perhaps can you work from home, or how often can you work from home? What time are you expected to be at work? How do you handle vacations? Those types of things. And this resource management plan tells us how to control physical resources, the materials, the equipment, the facilities that we have on our project. How do we control those? How do we measure those? Are they being delivered on time? Are the quantities needed available? Do they meet the quality requirements that we're expecting? And of course, we manage human resources. We don't control human resources. We manage them. And we manage them to the project plan. This resource management plan is going to cover all aspects such as this. And then last but not least is team recognition. How do we go about recognizing the team? There's our resource management plan. Now you can think right off the top of your head, and rightfully, that a lot of these things are just standard management techniques, and they are. But once you document them, then you don't have to go back and document them again. You set it up in your template, and then you can pull it from your template library and reuse that many, many times for each new project that you might have. Then we have this process called develop schedule. Develop schedule. In this develop schedule process, this is where we pull a lot of things together. And I'll show you that in the next slide. But it's a big process. We have a large number of inputs. Basically, there's 3 critical items to our project schedule and to developing it. What? What are we going to schedule? That would come, of course, from our activity list. Next would be how long. How long will it take to complete that activity? And that comes from the activity duration estimates. Then our last one would be when. We might do a schedule network diagram, and we should do a schedule network diagram, and I'll show you a picture of one in just a minute, and that will establish when. What are the priorities? What are the dependency? Is it a mandatory dependency, a discretionary dependency, or external or internal dependencies? What are the dependencies? That project network diagram is built based on those dependencies and the priorities. Milestones. Milestones. We may have milestones or other constraints that we have to meet. We need to identify any schedule milestones or constraints that there might be, and they need to be clearly projected in the milestone list and also in our project network diagram or Gantt chart. We have what's called the critical path or critical paths, multiple. We may have multiple critical paths. And that is the longest path through the project. Based on the start date, if I know a critical path is 12 weeks long, I know that 12 weeks from the start of the project, I will be finished in this project. Unless I have something that runs behind schedule. I want to manage that critical path to make sure that we finish on that milestone called finish. Okay. Critical path. To get to the schedule baseline, just look at the things that you have to have. You have to have completed all these items here. You must have your project charter. You must have identified the stakeholders. You must have a project management plan, yes. At least a good part of it done. You must have collected requirements. You must have written your scope statement. You must have created your WBS, which would give you ultimately your scope baseline. Then you have to define activities. You create the activity list. You take each work package and you decompose it down into the activities that have to be completed for that work package to be completed. And you must do the activities, put them in the order in which they'll be performed, assign dependencies, and that's where you would sequence activities. And then you must have established the resources that you need. Resources will drive durations, won't they? They will. If I use 2 paint crews instead of 1, that drives how long it will take to paint a house, for example. If I need a crane, but that crane is not available for 6 weeks, that drives my duration. Estimate resources and estimate activity durations work hand in hand with each other. Here are some of the items I've talked about. We have the project schedule and the schedule baseline. 2 different items. 2 different items. Project schedule is a document. The project schedule is made up of the milestone list, the Gantt chart, and the network diagram. If that's the case, what is my schedule baseline? Now, as a project manager, you're going to make a determination what your schedule baseline is going to be. It may be the Gantt chart, the project network diagram, and the milestone chart. It could be. But the difference is this. The schedule baseline is placed under control. Once it's issued, it's placed under control. It's a control plan. If I need to change the schedule for some reason, then I have to have an approved change request to modify the project schedule. The baseline is at your choosing, and the network diagram right here shows us the dependencies and all when we map out all of our activities on the project. And it helps us to understand then how to create the Gantt chart. We talk about this quite a bit in the classes that I conduct, but as an introduction here, let me just say that, believe me, the network diagram is very important It gives us, if you look at that, for example, look at that from a pictorial view versus a Gantt chart, and you can see that it gives me a lot of good information on when I'll be doing my activities. I can establish the date when each activity will start, the duration, and the completion date. I can use this to help me establish what the float of each activity is, and just a number of things that I can do with this. Of course, in reality, as far as the project schedule goes, that's what we will distribute to everyone. Take senior management, for example. They want the milestone list. They don't want the details. How about the functional managers? They want the Gantt chart. They want to know when their people will be working on the project. How about the project team and the project manager? Our focus should really be on this project network diagram. And yes, we may use the Gantt chart as well as the milestone chart. But our focus would be on this project network diagram. Then we have another key, and that is called the cost baseline. Now you have to have the schedule baseline. You have to have the cost baseline before this process can start. This is based on the activity cost estimates. How much does each activity cost for physical and human resources? And the budget is then time phased to the schedule. I know when I'll be performing each activity in my schedule, and I time phase the cost to that schedule. I know when I'll be paying out for each activity. Then we can make sure to do funding limit reconciliation, which is where we establish the organization's ability to pay for the project based on the schedule. Once again, this is a baseline. To change it, we need an approved change request. What's your cost baseline going to look like? It can take on many different formats. But this is just a description here. Look at this project. In this project, we had the original baseline. We had our original budget right here. But as we started planning for this project, we realized that the costs were going to overrun. And this is what I ended up with right here as far as cost goes. You can see by this that the cost overruns was due to overspending in some areas. Now, how did I deal with this? I issued a change request because each one of these were specific circumstances that caused the cost overrun. We issued a change request on each one of them, and that change request was approved. And then you can see I have a new cost baseline because it went from $750,000 to $840,000 because approved change requests were issued for each one of these. I have a revised baseline. Originally it was $750,000. Actual, the new cost baseline is $840,000. Let's take a look at this best practice here. Now, I've talked about a lot of different plans here. A lot of different plans. I had mentioned the generic plans and all. And a best practice is these plans, again, let me make this statement. The plan should be as long as it needs to be. It may be a paragraph long. The subsidiary plans might be 2 pages long, 3 pages long, if that's what's needed. But what you can do with these generic plans is you can combine them into one overall plan. And that's what I really recommend. And that one overall plan, then you can make 1 paragraph, 2 paragraphs, 4 paragraphs, whatever's needed for a description of each one of these. But in this case, look at this. The configuration management plan and the change management plan are very important plans in project management. Keep those as individual subcomponents of the project management plan. In other words, I have a physical plan for each one of those. I'm not including them in the overall project management plan. I'm using them on every project, but I'm not including them in the generic plan. Then we come down to the performance measurement baseline, project lifecycle description. developmental approach, scope management plan, requirements management plan, schedule management plan, cost management plan, and risk management plan. Again, we can describe these in a limited amount of paragraphs, and what I'm saying here is combine those into an overall comprehensive project management plan. What would that look like? We look at the overall project management plan. You can see that I have a section here for project lifecycle description. Then, like developmental approaches, we may have different parts of the project that we'll develop using different methods. Subsidiary management plans, such as the scope management plan, describe what you need for scope management. Same thing for requirements management plan, schedule management plan, cost, quality, resource, communications, risk, procurement, stakeholder engagement, management review. All the subsidiary plans that we've talked about. Here's scope variance, schedule variance, cost variance. And then we attach to this the baselines, for example. We attach project-specific plans, the parts of them that are quality, resource, communications, and stakeholder. And then we attach the generic plans for change management and configuration management. If we take that approach, that's the best practice, that will help us a lot, and this plan will guide us through the project. Most important for developing a project management plan, make sure it's usable. You don't want to develop something that's going to sit on a shelf and nobody's going to look at. Make sure it's usable and that it can be followed. Then you get the sign-offs on this. You want to make sure you get the functional managers to sign off. Some of you said that you had a problem getting the resources when you need them and getting them focused on it. This is one of the ways that you can get that accomplished is by having their bosses, first of all, sign it saying they're buying into the project. And then even your team members, you could get to sign this and get their commitment from it. That is the project management plan.